Hello. I have written something, so pardon me for reading it. Some personal background first. I was born into a Republican household. Growing up, I was completely committed to being a conservative. In my 20s, I began a long, slow transition that ended with me being a Democrat. Now, I am not a Republican or a Democrat, and I don't vote for either party. Perhaps at this point you're wondering, hey, what's wrong with being a conservative? Or, hey, what's wrong with being a liberal? Well, I don't think that you really are a conservative or a liberal. Deep down, I think you're a socialist. Here's why. If I asked you who you thought should be in control of the government, working class people or millionaires and billionaires, who would you choose? If I asked you, should workers get all the profit for the work they do, or should the majority of that profit go to a lazy person who does nothing, which would you choose? If you chose the worker in either of those situations, congratulations, you're a socialist. Socialism is the suppressed party of the working class. It has been long suppressed for the benefit of those in power, the corporate elite. Under capitalism, we have a man up here at the top of the company who does nothing. He is lazy. And we have the workers down here who manufacture the product and create all profit for the company. Say a worker generates this much profit during their shift. Under capitalism, of this profit they've created, they only get this much. That is their wages. Some of this total profit gets taken out to go towards expenses. The rest of this profit goes up here to the person at the top who does nothing. Socialism says the worker generated this profit. The worker deserves all of this profit. Socialism says the workers should own the means of production, aka private property. It shouldn't belong to one person who exploits all the workers and takes all their profit for himself and his shareholders. To believe that the working class should receive all the money for the hard work they do is socialism. Now, the problem with being a Republican or a Democrat is twofold. First off, under either of those labels, you are a capitalist. As a capitalist, you argue to keep millionaires and billionaires in power. You want the people who are lazy, the people who make all their money by exploiting you, to be in control of the government. This is going against your interests. It is enabling your oppressors. The second part of the problem with being a Democrat or a Republican is the part you play in the culture war. The culture war is officially defined as pretty much all the stuff we argue about online. Now, conservatives, in many cases, if not most, take the stance against women, against people of color, against minorities, against immigrants, against members of the LGBTQIA+ community, and against the preservation of the planet. They are nearly always pro-police, pro-military, and pro-prison. This is not good, because they are villainizing people who aren't their enemy, and they are advocating for systems which were put in place to oppress the working people here in the States and abroad. This conservative stance of the Republicans seems to come from a sense of traditionalism. Basically, they miss the past. They miss the good old days. They miss the way things were. The problem with that is, the past was racist, sexist, homophobic, transphobic, and all sorts of other horrible things. It's essentially the anti-progress side of the culture war. But the culture war is manufactured. The culture war is designed by the rich to split the working class. While Democrats and Republicans fight tooth and nail over these heated, very important cultural issues, the rich get richer and their reach gets broader. Nearly every corporation profits off this culture war. Traditional media and social media profit off division. Clickbait headlines get the most traffic. Pitting one group against another will get the most engagement in the comments when the arguing starts. And my goodness, do the two sides argue. We've been arguing about the same things, throwing the same arguments back and forth, all of it falling on deaf ears for years. All this conflict and hatred within the culture war is designed with the intention of keeping the working class divided. When we, the working class, argue with each other, the rich ruling class wins. And capitalism keeps driving this divide further for profit. Businesses during Pride Month put rainbow flags on everything not out of the goodness of their heart, but to make a profit. For that same reason, stores will sell US flags with a thin blue line down the middle. Some companies produce Blue Lives Matter stickers and other companies produce Black Lives Matter stickers. One group of people boycotts Target and the other group buys up any rainbow product they can find during Pride Month. And capitalism takes this to the extreme, too. Gun makers sell more guns after school shootings. That's right. For some, school shootings are just good for business. Meanwhile, nothing reasonable is ever done to prevent school shootings. Thanks to the culture war, we are wasting our time repeating the same tired arguments about either banning the sale of all guns or forcing teachers to take up arms and shoot their violent students. Can we just take a moment to imagine a world where our schools are better funded, where kids aren't growing up surrounded by hopelessness and despair, and where getting mental health care is more accessible than a gun? Can we imagine that? That type of future is possible, but not if the working class is divided. We cannot allow this issue of guns to divide us. I personally don't like guns at all. That's just me. But if you're the type of person who believes that it's important to have guns just in case you ever need to overthrow a tyrannical government that doesn't represent the people, you are exactly the type of person that I want to own guns. I'll just leave it at that. To be clear, I take just as much issue with the liberals and the part they play in the culture war. They are the ones who claim to be on the side of the downtrodden, the oppressed, and the marginalized. But they'll turn around and do all sorts of horrifying things the second they get power, like selling cluster bombs to Ukraine, a literal war crime, or separating children from their families at the border and keeping them in cages. Liberals are hypocrites. They are the embodiment of the store with two signs in the window, one saying, "All are welcome here," and the other saying, "Restroom for paying customers only." I am frankly convinced that they want to keep minorities oppressed so that they can always run on the platform of, "We care about oppressed minorities, vote for us." Their whole strategy is to use Republicans to hold people on the left hostage and say, "You have to vote for Biden, the worst candidate in the universe, or else everything will fall apart and it will be your fault. But also, if he wins, we won't actually do anything for you. We'll be too busy sending over $70 billion to Ukraine because we're desperate for the start of World War III. Let's not forget, it was under Biden that a whole lot of women lost control of their bodies, and right after that happened, Pelosi was out asking for 100,000 donations before midnight in order to better fight for women's rights. It's all about the money for them. The abortion issue is very simple, by the way. We don't force anyone to donate a kidney against their will, even if doing so would save the life of someone else. We don't take any life-saving organs from corpses if they didn't give consent to it when they were alive. Nobody should be forced to donate their own womb in order to save the life of a fetus. Living people with wombs deserve the same rights that we give to our corpses. Want to lower abortions? Teach safe sex. Make condoms and birth control pills free and accessible. Don't charge thousands of dollars for someone to give birth in a hospital. Provide time off and funds for new parents, especially single parents, including access to childcare, diapers, and all the other added expenses that come with having a baby. Yeah, it turns out saving these babies' lives costs a lot, but it's important that these kids live and thrive, right? To be clear, I think people on the left would be wise to admit that we do want abortions to be more rare occurrences. We want abortions to be very rare occurrences. But the way to reduce abortions is through those things that I mentioned, not a heartless ban that abandons people who are in desperate need of help and support. And in the end, we have to extend to living people the same rights that we give to dead bodies. I think that's reasonable. Now to get into the mind frame of the naysayers. They might hit me with, "Capitalism breeds innovation. The phone you're filming with wouldn't be here without capitalism." Here's my counterpoint. This phone was made by exploited workers. These clothes were made by exploited workers. The food that I eat was all prepared and packaged by exploited workers. There is no ethical consumption under capitalism. Some of our most popular chocolate brands are getting their ingredients from child slaves. Innovation shouldn't be happening with just the goal of making a profit. Innovation should be happening with the goal of helping people. Workers will be more motivated to work under socialism because they will receive all the profit for the work they do. Workers will be motivated to innovate in order to better the lives of the people, themselves included. As we advance and automate more things, people are going to be working less. Under capitalism, automation is scary because it means we lose jobs. But under socialism, automation is great because it means we get to work less and can spend more time on education and innovation, on bettering ourselves, and on just enjoying our lives. And under socialism, all students will be able to reach their full potential, not just the students coming from wealthy families. Our current capitalist government is controlled by billionaires and corporations. How? Well, they can afford lobbyists. And they use their lobbyists to lobby only for their selfish interests, never the interests of the people. Look up our elected officials and see how many in Congress are millionaires. Millionaires do not represent the people of the United States. They represent the rich. That's who they're there to serve because that's who they are. Under our current system, you have to be rich to even have a chance of being elected. Whoever buys the most ads wins, essentially. So the working class isn't represented in our government, and corporations are the ones writing our laws. This is what we're defending when we defend capitalism. And all these rich people are wealthy through wage theft. They all got rich off the profit we created. Corporate profit is wage theft. You should also look into how much these politicians make through stock trading. It seems like they've got some insider info. Defending capitalism is defending the party that serves our exploiters. Under socialism, the working class would control the government and would enact policies that served the people, not the corporate elite. The working class controlling the government is a key part of socialism. Do I trust a capitalist government run by the ultra-rich to provide universal health care? No. I trust a socialist government to provide universal health care because I know that they have the interests of the people at heart, not the interests of the corporations. Now you might be saying, wait a minute, you just said we'd get all the profit for the work we do. Now you're talking about free healthcare. Who's going to pay for that? And to that I say, you are already paying taxes. I'm only suggesting that your tax dollars actually go towards serving you instead of 70 billion of them going to Ukraine and 2 trillion of them going to funding our imperial army with 750 bases scattered across 80 countries. We'll spend trillions of dollars on killing people, but helping the people of Hawaii would be a government handout. Let's just have Oprah the billionaire ask working people to donate to charity for that one. Let us briefly consider the response to the COVID vaccine. Interestingly, the conservatives did not trust the doctors, the scientists, or the government when they advocated for the use of the vaccines. Deep down, the Republicans felt that our elected officials didn't have the best interests of the people at heart, and they didn't trust Big Pharma. Why? Capitalism is the root cause of this distrust. The Republicans do not trust the corporations who make our medicines because they know, even if they won't admit it, that our medicine is made with the primary goal of profit, and that's not good. Could it possibly be that medicines in this country are being designed by people who want us to become reliant on the medicine more than they want us to get well? I don't know, just throwing that out there. Let's also talk about how expensive insulin is in this country. Insulin is necessary for people who have diabetes, and instead of making it easily accessible, we've jacked up the price for the maximum profit possible. So what if some people with diabetes die, right? In an advanced, caring, and capable society, healthcare and housing should be human rights. Is it really so crazy to say that? Speaking of COVID, we also need to acknowledge the fact that the government's response to COVID was an entirely capitalist response. Massive corporations saw their profits soar during the pandemic while small businesses went under and working class people risked their lives just to survive. That is capitalism functioning as intended. The working class should have stood united against the surge in corporate profit because it was blatant wage theft. Instead, the Republican Party's criticism of masks as a restriction of freedom became the perfect culture war misdirect. While we were arguing on Twitter against each other about wearing masks, the corporations filled their pockets with our wages. We didn't lose our freedom because we were asked to wear masks. We've lost our freedom because under capitalism, we are all wage slaves, making money for corporations who don't care if we live or die. Now some might approach me with the argument of, socialism's failed everywhere it's been tried. What about Venezuela? Communism has killed 100 million people. These arguments fall apart when we realize that the history of socialist and communist nations has been skewed in the US. Why would our country, which is controlled by the rich, lie about socialism and communism in our history books and our mainstream media? Could it be because it serves corporate interests? I think so. Let's look at Cuba. Fidel Castro and the people of Cuba overthrew a US-backed military dictator. In response, the US committed multiple terrorist attacks in Cuba. We tried to assassinate Fidel Castro over 500 times, and we embargoed Cuba, which has gone on since the 1960s to this very day. Cuba still managed to make great strides in education, in their literacy rate, in the amount of doctors they produce, and in reducing homelessness to near zero. All that said, don't get me wrong, Cuba is still struggling. The nation is a very small island, and they are very poor, which is thanks to the US U.S. embargo. The U.S. has set itself up to be both the oppressor of Cuba and the savior of the Cuban people when they come washing up on our shores looking for a better life that we took from them. We must end the embargo against the Cuban people. China has been doing an astoundingly good job of eradicating poverty in recent years. Chairman Mao himself raised the life expectancy of his people drastically. Lenin and Mao both overthrew horrid rulers who had turned their populations into starving peasants. It was Stalin and the Soviets who played the very decisive role in conquering the Nazis. Venezuela is suffering right now because of sanctions put in place by the US. We're starving them out to get their oil. Trump so much has admitted this. Now let's talk about the death toll of communism, which supposedly claimed 100 million lives. That sure seems like a lot on its own. Maybe, in the interest of fairness, we should look into the many horrors and deaths caused by capitalism. Looking at the United States right off the bat, we have the genocide of the Native American people, the enslavement of black people for over 100 years. Every single person who lived and died in slavery counts as a death caused by capitalism in my book. After that, we had segregation for nearly 100 years, which still negatively impacts people to this day. We've had lynchings, police brutality, police murder, school shootings, multiple imperialist wars. We killed over 1 million innocent Muslims after 9/11. We sacrificed and took lives in Afghanistan for over 20 years for nothing. Except oil, of course. We raped, abused, and murdered the people of Vietnam who just wanted a better future for their working people. We killed an estimated 40,000 civilians in Venezuela through our harsh sanctions. We want their oil, so it's okay. The Great Depression killed 5 to 10 million people. It's estimated that between 17,500 and 46,500 people died of homelessness in the U.S. in 2018. Over 500,000 people are currently homeless in the U.S. We have the highest incarceration rate in the world. We have more people in prison than China does, despite China's population being over 4 times higher than our own. Yet for some reason China is called a police state and the US isn't. Slavery is still legal in our prisons. Our military has actively tortured innocent men for decades in Guantanamo Bay. Roughly 13,600 people die of starvation in the US every year. 33.8 million people experience food insecurity every day in the US, including 9 million children. And all of this is just the US. Here's a big one. From 1880 to 1920, it's estimated that Britain killed over 100 million people in India. That's more than the entire death toll of communism right there. And that's not even including how many they killed when they colonized Africa. I think we should also consider the Jakarta method, which is the US's method for crushing people's revolutions in other countries. The Jakarta method gets its name in reference to the Indonesian mass killings of 1965 to 66, during which an estimated 1 million people were killed in an effort to destroy the political left and movements for government reform in that country. This capitalist argument about the death toll of communism only has one flaw. And it's the fact that capitalism kills and abuses astronomically more people. Hey, while we're talking about death tolls, has anybody ever looked into religion's death toll? At a glance, I see answers online ranging from 40 million to nearly 200 million. Do you suddenly want to advocate for the removal of all religion? Maybe you do, maybe you don't. I'll be honest, I don't. As a communist, I believe in freedom of religion, just as long as the practicing of your faith does not harm others. I think that's fair. Hey, so what is communism? Well, communism, unlike socialism, is an ideal. It's essentially socialism perfected. Under communism, the state, aka the government controlled by the working class, is no longer necessary because we, the people, don't have class struggle anymore. At that point, we would be working together in harmony for the good of all people. This stateless, classless, functioning society is communism. It's a picture of an ideal future for humankind. You could argue that it's just an ideal and not achievable in reality, but why does that mean we can't work toward getting as close to that ideal as possible? Because what is capitalism's ideal? What does it promise for the future? Does capitalism swear to end poverty, homelessness, and hunger at any point? No. Capitalism requires an underclass of people to exploit. Billionaires create poverty in order to exist. Capitalism is a system based on competition. So eventually, we end up with a few big winners, and the wage-earning masses are all the losers. Some people like to justify these winners and the ridiculous amounts of money that they have by saying they took a risk in starting a business, so they deserve all those profits. All you're saying here is that you think the worst possible thing that could happen to a rich person is they end up having to get an actual job and work for a living like you do. In your scenario, being a member of the working class is so terrible that CEOs deserve to be outrageously rewarded for successfully exploiting the working class. This objectively goes against the interests of all working people. So if you're a working person, consider not thinking this way. In the US, we've grown up within a system based on greed. Individual greed has been normalized in our society. We have been trained to claim that this greed is just the natural human state. We've been told that we live in a fallen world, that it can't get any better. Many popular religions predict a bleak future that God will have to save us from. These claims are designed to defend the status quo. We cannot accept such claims. Even Jesus himself still told us to help the poor, the orphans, and the widows. He certainly didn't tell us to shrug, say this is the way it is, and then help the rich. Jesus Christ was a revolutionary, whether he was the Son of God or not. He had his priorities straight. It was he who said it's easier for a camel to pass through the eye of a needle than for a rich person to enter heaven. Right now we have a choice to make. We can fight for a better future for our children and our children's children, or we can keep defending the status quo. We can fight for the rich and their right to rule over us, write our laws, and live in their own private utopia funded by our wages. All of this is why I and you should say, workers of the world, unite. Cast aside the single capitalist party that serves the interests of the rich ruling class and stand in solidarity with the one working class that cannot be divided by a manufactured culture war. Instead of blaming people of color or women or immigrants for your own tough situation, recognize that they have been brutally exploited throughout history by a system that exploits all of us to this day. Instead of imposing religious or traditional beliefs on members of the LGBTQIA+ community, recognize their freedom to love who they love and to be just as public and open about who they are as straight people have always been able to be. And while you're at it, recognize that they are being exploited the same as you, and they are not your enemy. Instead of judging people as uneducated, ignorant hicks, or rednecks, recognize that they have been cruelly exploited by a system that promised them a better life while secretly taking advantage of their lifetime of hard work. Don't be sucked into the culture war. Its divisiveness is by design because together we are stronger than them. We create all wealth, and we deserve all the profit for the work we do. There is no war but class war. It's not right versus left. It's the wealthy ruling class versus the working class, and there are more of us. The rich have class solidarity. We should too. If you are not profiting off the exploited labor of working people, you are not a capitalist, you are a worker. And the capitalist's job is to exploit you. So, if you believe the government should be run by the working class for the interests of the people, you are a socialist. If you believe that workers should own the means of production and receive all the profit for the work they do, you are a socialist. If you believe that people matter more than profit, you are a socialist. If you want to support those who work hard instead of lazy people who do nothing, you are a socialist. I think that you are actually a socialist. Whew! And that is what I wrote. So thank you for listening and watching and all that jazz. I want to recommend some books to you. One of the most influential books for me in just completely turning away from capitalism and embracing a different view was Fidel Castro's My Life. It's incredible. I love it. Next, I recommend Women, Race, and Class by Angela Davis. This book is just incredible. An important work to read. I recommend Washington Bullets by Vijay Prashad. That book does an incredible job of exposing a lot of covered up shady stuff that the US has done. I recommend the book Don't Forget Us Here by Mansour Adaifi. This book is the book that made me completely anti-US military. This is the story of the innocent men who were tortured in Guantanamo Bay for decades. I recommend Black Shirts and Reds by Michael Parenti. I recommend The Story of More by Hope Jahren. The End of Policing, I mentioned it in my China vlog. I recommend The Long Walk to Freedom by Nelson Mandela. I'll throw this one in here too. Assata, an autobiography by Assata Shakur. Assata's a legend. And that's what I want to say. This is a weird, I get it, this is a weird subject. This is a scary topic. Let's keep it civil in the comments. If you must disagree, you must. I accept that. I made this stinking video, So I get that. These are just my views, my thoughts. I've been radicalized through working in nonprofit organizations, which is another video I want to make and talk about. And reading these books has helped. We're at a point in our world where humanity is about to get wrecked, or we're about to come together and do something for the good of humanity. And I'm hoping that it's the second option. I would be happy to see any changes that are positive for the people. I would be happy to see things get better for all people in any way. That's all that I'm saying. So if capitalism were to suddenly start making things better for everybody and all people, if children stopped starving to death all around the world, if homelessness were to go away, like, I'm good, okay? If people worldwide have access to education, have access to healthcare and medicine, if people have access to healthy food, that's great by me. I love that. If people are lifted out of poverty, that's wonderful. But right now, capitalism is relying on poverty. There was even that video clip that came out recently of that billionaire rich guy talking like, we need unemployment to go up to at least 40 or 50%. Because right now, the workers think that we work for them, but no, they work for us, and they should be grateful for the starvation wages we give them and the way that we exploit them. That's scary for me. I shouldn't be rambling like this because I just read the whole thing, and that's the thing. So yeah, I'm done. Cheers to the working class. Here's to you for surviving in this mad, mad world, and here's to a better future. Oh my gosh, one more thing that I forgot to mention. Check the description down below. I'm going to be linking some different socialist and communist parties, just so you can check them out, see what they're all about, see what kind of stuff they're saying. Yeah, I think that's everything now. Comrade, I'll see ya.